for the terms
With
of
that.
reference?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning.
I think I'm waiting for Chris Turner for Quoracy. But I suggest I make a start, but maybe you can check, Sarah, with Chris that he'll join shortly. But as I said, we'll make a start. Good morning, everyone. James Bullion has sent his apologies, so I will chair today's meeting. My name is Hein van der Willenberg. I'm a non-executive member of the Integrated Care Board and Vice Chair of this committee. Today is a meeting in public. It is being recorded and will be available on YouTube afterwards. You will be aware this is a meeting at a different time and a different date than we had originally planned, but we couldn't make Quoracy work at the original time, so that's why we're meeting at this point. It's also a shorter meeting than usual, so I will try and keep us to time as we go through it. We received a number of apologies. Rosemary Moore, Bill Borrett, James Bullion, Sue Merton, LMC, Andrew Hayward. That's the list I have. I believe, Sarah, that's the latest update you had as well. Is that correct?
Yes, fine, that's correct. And Chris Turner's here now.
Yeah, excellent. Morning, Chris. Declarations of interest. Maybe to pick out one point, we'll have agenda item 6, and we had an email communication with James Foster, who is conflicted on that item. As it's a meeting in public, James will continue to be in the meeting, but will not take part in any discussion on this topic. And we should minute that accordingly. Any other item people want to highlight in view of today's agenda? No. Then we go to the minutes of the last meeting. Any comments from anyone on the minutes? There was one item I highlighted to Sadie and Sarah. That's on the question from the member of public last time. Two things. One, we should, I think, reference that the lady who asked the question was representing a social enterprise. Iris I, if I'm correct, is the name of the social enterprise. And I think there should be an action that the response is also being made available on the website afterwards. That's the only point I had, and I believe there's no further comments. So many thanks, Sarah, for the minutes. The action log, that's on page 17 of the pack. Several have been completed. Just a few I'll ask an update on. Action 127, Shepherd, you had an action to look more closely at the people who declined the health checks in learning disability. Any update you have on that, or you're going to talk to that as part of the agenda item?
Let's touch on that as part of the agenda item.
Yeah, excellent. There is an item 130, but it's not yet due, so I'll skip that. And there's action item 131 with Julian to focus on the data. I think that is being captured as part of his regular update. So I suggest we touch base on that when Julian provides an update on SMI checks. And the final one, 132, there is no date set for that one. Maybe for next time, Shepard, we can put a date to it, and then we can sort of keep track how that is progressing. Is that okay? Good. If there's no further comments, we'll move on to matters arising. That's on page 18, and I believe Fiona's with us to give an update on the terms of reference. Over to you, Fiona.
Thank you. So following discussion at the last committee meeting in January, we've collated all the responses from the committee and also key stakeholders, and reflected in the pack today is final drafts of both the terms of reference for the committee and the operational delivery groups which we're proposing to set up. Subject to any further comments from committee members, these will go to the board on the 28th of February for final approval, and we will be mobilising them from April. And we also need to think very carefully about how the interaction between this committee and those operational delivery groups functions, and it may, when we start working together, it may result in changes as to how often each of the committees and groups actually meet. But I think that'll be a work in progress over the sort of first 3 to 6 months of next financial year. So I'm happy to take any further questions or comments if there are any.
Many thanks, Fiona. Any questions for Fiona? No, all clear, and I think it's understood. The first 3 to 6 months we'll learn as we go along how the delivery groups and the committee itself interact. So many thanks, Fiona. That takes us to the forward planner. I think it's there for noting information. Anything you want to add, Sadie?
Only that we've had to postpone some of the more non-urgent items just because of time pressures today with rearranging the committee. So we've marked those in red so that they're not lost, and we'll bring them back. At next month's meeting, we'll also bring an early draft of the proposed planner for the new committee from April.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks. It was there for noting. That takes us to item 6 on the agenda, providing general practice services in Norwich, where there's a public consultation live. I think you will introduce that, Sadie. I'm aware it's for noting, but there's a lot of interest in the topic, so maybe you can give us an update where we're at.
Yes, thank you. Sarah, could you also please invite Kristen in?
I think she's on the call.
Is she?
Yeah.
Great.
Yes, she's here.
Lovely, thank you. So Kristen is our comms lead, who's been working with us on this project. You'll see here that we've included the consultation document itself, and this went live on the 24th of January. It's by way of survey. And this week we're also going live with our face-to-face engagement, recognising that not everybody can respond to surveys and it doesn't reach everybody as well. And this is the same organisation that we used when we did the extensive pre-engagement work last year. So they are going to be engaging directly with people using the walk-in centre at the walk-in centre, but also reaching out to voluntary organisations that are advocates for some of the more vulnerable populations using the service. Kristen, can I ask you just to tell us how many completed surveys we've got to date? Because it's really good, isn't it? We've had really good engagement so far.
Yes, so far we've had almost 1,600 completed surveys, as well as over 3,000 partial surveys, which are people that have opened up the survey and completed some or none of it and just taken a look. So total engagement with the survey so far then is over 5,000 participants.
Thanks. So clearly that's fantastic, and we hope that it continues to grow. The survey runs to the 26th of March, so there's still plenty of time for people to engage, and we're continuing to push that on social media and so on, because it is really, really important that people share their views on the the options, and also any other ideas that they may have. It is a genuine consultation. We really want to hear from people as to what they think of the three options that are set out, and how they would like to see healthcare best suit their needs in the future. Yeah, we're so far, I think, really pleased with the level of engagement with the consultation, and we'll keep pushing it so that we get as many responses as possible, which will help us then inform any future decisions around how we take this forward. Is there anything you'd like to add, Kristen?
Just that within the survey itself, we've created, free-form text options for people to provide sort of narrative views on the options, alternative things that they'd like to see, asking things that we haven't thought of yet, as well as some tick boxes for specific, preferences for access, so that we can really get kind of a clear view and a clear sort of direction, not just in a narrative form, but actual, types of preferences that will help shape options at the other end. So hopefully people will find lots of different ways to sort of provide their views within the survey. And further to that, I'd say we've also made printed copies are available both at the WIC and at the GP practice on Rouen Road, and people can request alternative copies, translations. So we've tried to make it as accessible as possible, that people can contact us and request different forms. So we're working through a Braille request at the minute. So we are getting a fair amount of interest and activity on the website as well in terms of downloads.
Thank you.
Very good. Many thanks, Sadie and Kristen. And very encouraging to hear about the response rate. So that's very good. Let me see if there's any questioning. Can I also invite members of the public who may have a question? Now there's at the end a chance for the public to respond, but given the interest, I thought I want to give an opportunity now. James, reader.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you very much indeed. Yeah, very interesting paper. And the figure I picked out was 5,666 people in a particular month walking in, and I think you did include the figure of over 500,000 appointments to give them a comparison. You all know better than I, that looks pretty impressive to have 5,600 people who would otherwise have to find alternative provision. And I would have thought, reading the paper, that this option of the walk-in centres is obviously certainly helping with capacity issues and must be taking some strain off other surgeries within the area. So I would have thought, and obviously the survey and everything will bear that out, that this is a great success. And is it something that may be looked at further afield rather than just in that one particular area? So what my question really is, I suppose, is that based on the number, it seems very impressive, and I'm just really worried where those people would go if they didn't go there. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Sadie, you want to pick that up?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I mean, there are quite a number of services which run at the same time as the walk-in centre. So, for example, since October, we have enhanced access provision available across all primary care networks now. And we also have the GP out of hours service. I think, though, what we are proposing in option 3, and certainly option 1 is to keep things as they are, that we would not lose that capacity, because it's very clear to us that the capacity is needed in the area. I think the potential for option 3 is to design something that is potentially more distributed throughout Norwich. So working with practices, with the primary care network, to design where it would need to be placed. So it might, one of those outcomes might be that there are more open facilities across Norwich. And with your point about other areas, I think, you know, what we will get is some really rich feedback. We're already getting it from the survey responses that we've got about how people like to access services. And as the ICB starts to develop its population health data and its population health approach to developing services, I think, you know, we do need to look at what how services could be shaped across the whole of Norfolk and Waveney. So I think, you know, at this stage there are no conclusions because we've got a long way to go on the survey. But what there are a lot of there's a lot of really fantastic feedback coming through that's going to be so useful in helping us not only in thinking about Norwich and the future shape of services in primary care and in general practice, but also to think about how that influences what we do elsewhere in the patch, because Norwich is not the only urban centre. You know, there are other areas with the same sorts of issues around deprivation, for example, and inequalities that we do need to consider.
Thanks, Sadie. Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Hein. So mine was just around, and apologies if I've missed it, Sadie, was just around the, when we've got the responses, is that something that we're pulling together into a, you know, what that looks like, or are we engaging with external partners as well?
So we have got, I might ask Kristen just to respond to that bit, because the work has actually already started on that, hasn't it, Kristen?
Yes, so we've contracted an engagement company that are supporting us with this consultation, and they are going to be providing interim reports along the way to help sort of get a snapshot of the key themes emerging and enable us to sort of benchmark the evolution of themes over time, so we can sort of track how responses are going, and then they will be pulling together the final report for us as well.
That's great, thank you.
Thanks. Any other question? No. Many thanks, Sadie and Kristen, for the update. That takes us to item 7, Learning Disability Health Checks update. Over to you, Shepard.
Thank you, Hein. This is now a usual paper every month, so I'm just going to focus more on the progress that we've made since last time we met, and also just to highlight some of the queries from last time. I think the comparison within East Anglia is now included. That was a question that Mark posed last time. And just to make a comment on that, I think obviously we have seen more people compared to any other system in the region. The data is as at the end of October. We're expecting the Q3 data for end of December to come through this week. So members will have that information again next month reporting. Looking at how we are doing since April to December within our localities, clearly we have made another improvement this month, 5% improvement compared to last month we reported. And partly that improvement is a bit lower than we have been doing. This was to do more of the festive period. And we're expecting improvements in January data, but we are not as well. The festive period is impacting on that. So we are projecting that our activity will significantly improve in February and March, and that will be consistent with the previous years. But also, I think I have to say that because we've done so well, there is a risk of complacency. So we are on the case with our practices and colleagues to ensure that we don't relax because we've done so well. Overall, I think it's fair to say we are on track to deliver our commitment to beat the national target and also to progress towards our ambition to see more people. I think just to touch on the declines, because I think that's a very important aspect, because I think we are reaching into a different territory, an exciting territory, the areas where we've not been before, looking into people that we have not been able to reach out before. It's a very complex area. We are working hard every day on it. I will illustrate the quality of work that is going into this. So one of the practices that we are working with intensively has reviewed all their patients, and we identified 16 people that have declined. And we have put some dedicated resource to try and reach out to those people. The challenge we are experiencing is that practices are not designed to do that intensive work, to go out to knock at people's doors and see that through. We are in discussion within the ICB with other departments to see how best can we target those 16 people. That's one of the practices that we are working with. And we are doing the same in the south of Norfolk. We have people that have not been seen in the past because of their clinical presentation, and it requires specialist interventions for those particular people. So I'm just illustrating the new areas that we are reaching with this piece of work as we continue to improve and improve. I hope that kind of addresses or touches on the declines, because I don't think it's straightforward. It involves actually that qualitative intervention, conversation, getting to meet families, and that requires resources. So having said that, I think it's fair to say we are seeing strong improvements around the health action plan. So as our numbers improves, we are also improving on quality, and the focus on quality is increasing. So that leads me to say I'm really pleased that we successfully secured about 250,000, which we will use towards buying devices that will help to take bloods from people with learning disabilities and SMI without them seeing the needle. So it's a new technology that we are using, and that will help us improve on the quality of our annual health checks, and also the speed at which the results would be available to clinical colleagues. Apparently, it takes about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes for those blood tests to be available to the clinical team to discuss with patients. So I'm really excited about that. We'll stop there unless if members have got any specific questions that they would like to pose.
Many thanks, Shepard, and very interesting to hear about those updates that will foster improved quality. Let me see if there's any questions. James Reader.
Thank you very much again, Chair. Yeah, very interesting. Would you say, and other people on the call, those people who are you're not able to reach, are they the most vulnerable, or are they not necessarily the most vulnerable? They have just as you mentioned, a phobia about a needle, etc. So I'm just concerned that those people that are declining the test are not the most vulnerable and those at risk. Is there any way of knowing that? Because completely understand your comment about surgeries are not geared up to go knocking on doors, and you've said, talked about that, but is it necessary to put more resource into that because they are the most vulnerable people? I don't know if that's a question you can answer. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, and that's real. So I would say it's both, and I will illustrate that. So we have been successful in contacting some people that we have not been able to see over the last 24 months, and the feedback from those was that I was given this diagnosis when I was very little. I'm actually holding a successful job in a bank in the city. And the telephone assessments have indicated to us that actually there is a group of people that have got this diagnosis that they got at that point when they were very young, and it was never followed through. So there is a cleansing clinical exercise that needs to take place, and we've made recommendations to the practices to consider removing those people because they don't have that diagnosis in some ways. Then the other cohort are people with very complex enduring clinical presentations that practices are not geared to deal with that clinical complexity. And it requires some specialist type of conversation to be able to understand or to support them that way. And one of the practice has identified 2 people that they are really uncomfortable to get their staff to meet with them, and we are in discussion on how or who is better placed to provide those checks.
So very complex, as you described. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Thanks, Shepard. Any other questions or comments for Shepard? No, many thanks, Shepard, and I think we can close action 127 accordingly. That takes us to item 8, the quarterly update on the States, and I see Paul and Catherine have joined us. So over to you guys. You can assume people have read the papers, but grateful if you can pick out the highlights, and then we'll open up for discussion. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Hein. Yeah, as Hein said, I've seen the papers read, but there's a few points I wanted to highlight. So just starting with Wave 4B, just wanted to highlight that for the Thetford scheme, the business case is with NHS England now, and we're expecting approval from NHS England or otherwise on the 28th of February this month, which is a lot quicker kind of turnaround from them compared to the programme business case, which is really positive. For the 2 larger schemes at Kings Lynn and Rackheath, we're about 2 to 3 weeks behind programme, or where we'd like to be on that scheme, but we've been about 2 to 3 weeks behind now for about 3 months, so that's kind of stayed the same. But the good news is we're not falling further behind, and we're still on target, to achieve business case approval for those schemes by the end of August. So still quite a bit of risk on the programme, but things are kind of proceeding to plan at the moment, which is positive. Last quarter, we talked a bit around pressures on primary care for the future. We talked specifically about Attleborough last time, and I had an action to go away to come back to kind of present a view of what's happening across the rest of the rest of the patch. So we've tried to do that via Appendix 3 and Appendix 4 within the paper, which shows using a formula basis our estimated view of capacity in terms of square meters of a building to serve the future population. So we've cut that by PCN, and then we've plopped that on plotted that on a map. Personally, I think the PCN view is a bit misleading. Some of the border issues aren't easily visible from when you look at it in a tabular form. But in a map view, I think it's more transparent as to where potential problems are going to be in the next kind of 15 years. What I would say is that at the moment we're using a crude formula which averages out at 16 meters square per patient is what kind of a target rate, with some variability to that depending upon the size of your population. But the PCN toolkit work, which is underway, uses a more scientific approach to measure capacity. So that is due to complete in approximately 2 months' time. Once we've got that, we'll then be able to refresh all of our kind of workings so we can see what that looks like. And for the first time, we'll be able to compare how Norfolk and Waveney looks like estate capacity-wise compared to the rest of the region and the rest of the country, which I think will be really, really helpful. And the purpose, one of the purposes of this exercise is to help the national team pull a case together to evidence what investment is needed within primary care estate in the next spending review. Because at the moment, there's no planned capital investment coming our way above our BAU allocation of 2 million a year. So we know we've got a problem, but at the moment there's no capital there to fix that problem, which hopefully things will change over the coming years. But this should help highlight the scale of that problem across the country. And the last thing I wanted to pick up on was rent reviews. So we give a brief update every quarter on where we are with rent reviews, and the last update in here is 5 rent reviews were approved in December. I just wanted to highlight to the committee that from April 23, this function will be transferring from NHS England to the ICB, which will give us greater control and clarity of what the process is. So I think that's positive overall, but I do have some concerns in that at the moment there's 3 individuals who run this process across the east of England. 2 of them are only funded via non-recurrent funding, and 1 of them is on a recurrent basis. So that recurrent funding is going to transfer across the 6 ICBs, which doesn't add up to very much. It's about £9,000 per ICB. And that's what we're expected to deliver the service on. We have got capacity within my team, or I've made capacity within my team to pick this up, but the handover hasn't started yet, and we're only 7 weeks away from this transitioning to us. So I think I'm a bit nervous that there's a bit of a risk there that it could all go, might be fine, but it could all go horribly wrong. I hope not. But until we start that handover, which is due to start in a couple of weeks, we don't know what we don't know yet. So just wanted to flag to the committee there is a potential risk there come April around the rent review process. That's all I wanted to highlight from the paper, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Paul. Maybe on the last point, maybe for Sadie to consider whether it warrants inclusion on the risk register. You're closer to it. Maybe when the next time we do a risk update, it can be given consideration. James Reader.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for allowing me on each of these items. But I'm just wondering on Section 106 monies, and in the paper it's highlighted about the Lowestoft site, which is close to my heart, but not majoring on that. Has the committee or the ICB considered the closer or combined working with local authorities in getting 106 monies from developers? The only reason I ask this is because yesterday Cabinet here in Suffolk County Council had a briefing on it, and The negotiations, my understanding is, the 106 monies are one through the local authority and also through the health service to get the best they possibly can. Has there ever been any consideration of combining that role within the ICB to give economies of scale, to be able to bring these infrastructure projects along quicker? I'm just wondering if that has ever been thought of within the estate, within ICB. So I'm not sure this committee can answer that, but it's something that I just wonder whether we should, or somebody should be giving some thought to. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, James.
I can come back on that, Hein. So the ICB now does host a team on behalf of the ICS, which looks purely at planning applications. They've been, I think they've been quite successful over the last year in terms of being able to evidence to each of the district councils the need for SIL or Section 106 money to fund health infrastructure. And that team provides a single response on behalf of the ICS. So they'll collect the primary care view and the view from the NHS trusts as well. But it's not a quick process. So they could be successful in putting in an application, but it could take years for us to then receive that capital contribution once the various trigger points have been received. So I think it's been a good investment now, but we won't see the benefits for some years to come. We're not, from an NHS perspective, we're not helped by each of the district councils having different processes. There's a mixture of Section 106 and SIL. All of them are slightly different. They're the rules that we have to follow, but it would be a lot easier if there was just one process to follow across the system. Which there's probably not much that we can do about that, but we are making progress with the councils, and I think that's kind of evidence with a few of the district councils. We're looking at schemes where the district council will take a potential commercial role in being a developer of a health site, and us to then rent back from them. So hopefully be less. It looks like less profit than a private developer, and as they have better access to capital than us, it might speed up delivery of some sites as well.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think it's a good general point you raised, James. So I've taken note of it as well, and see if I can pick it up with colleagues. Maybe you touched upon it also. Apologies if you already covered it, but in the note it says, at the time you wrote it, work is on the way to engage with the remaining 6 PCNs on this toolkit program. Where is it still 6 that need to join, or has there been further progress?
Yes, we've got 11 of the 17 PCNs involved in the program. We've now kind of run out of time to get the remaining 6 involved from the clinical strategy perspective, though we had a deadline to the end of January. So we still need something for the remaining 6. We're coming up with a plan B for those 6 systems in terms of what we can do from an estate perspective to make certain that we don't lose out on any future opportunities to evidence need for those 6. 11 of 17 is probably better engagement than I expected at this time of year. There's never a good timing for these programs, but given the winter pressures, I think 11 is positive, and compared to the rest of the region, we're kind of slightly above average in terms of engagement as well, which is really good. The feedback we've been given is that the East of England region is significantly ahead of the rest of the country on engagement on this program as well. So it would have been great to get 100%, but I'm quite pleased that we've got 11 out of the 17.
Yeah. Thanks. Any further questions for Paul or Catherine? Thank you both for the update. And we move to the next item 9. I think Shepard, you will guide us through the CQC report.
Thank you. Hi. This is for Notting. This is a re-inspection back in November, following this practice being placed in special measures back in March last year. Which year? Yeah. I'm really pleased that the ICB, CQC, and everyone has worked really hard to turn around this practice from special measures now has been re-inspected and rated as requires improvements. I think just to highlight that they have maintained a good rating around caring for the service. And I think the previous inspection was good, and this time they're good in that. The other domains have improved, and that is recognized through our work with CQC and other partners and the practice itself. However, there are still some areas that would need to be consolidated, which is the ongoing pieces of work, like many of our practice. I think the key areas remains that still further improvements that is required around medicines management. But I should say that they are in a better place than many other practices that have been inspected before. Leadership also remains an area for further improvement, but it's well acknowledged that the leadership has improved and they're working together. So we've got ongoing work to do with the practice to strengthen all those key areas around leadership, governance, medicines management. But I'm positive that with continued support and the focus that we are having on practice resilience across the patch, we'll be able to continue to see improvements with this practice. I'll stop.
Yep. Thanks, Shepherd. Chris?
Yeah, just to support everything that Shepherd said, I think it is a positive news story for this practice. And I think certainly from the CQC perspective, it's more around the green shoots are there. They've made the improvements. It's now the time to embed it. And I think if they can do that, then we'll see an even more positive inspection report when they're re-inspected. But they've made good progress.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions or comments on this item? No, many thanks for the update and good to see the progress for the HEACH practice. That takes us to item 10, SMI health check. Julian, you want to introduce that?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Hein. So good morning, everyone. I just wanted to take you through the update for February for severe mental illness. And assuming the paper is read, I will skip to section 2, which is the Q3 performance data, which really shows a good news of improvement and one that we hope to sustain. So looking at the checks carried out within GP practices, the system has carried out 4,051 checks from a possible 9,664. That is a 427 increase of checks delivered more than Q2. Looking at NSFT, 42 checks additional have been carried out compared to Q2. So in total, the system has carried out 469 additional checks more compared to Q2, which shows a really stark improvement. It's one that I think has been delivered by increased transparency around data. It's shown the priority of our bookings. We wanted definitely to see a focus on the delivery of not just learning difficulties, but severe mental illness. And I think the system has responded accordingly to that. I think there's still a lot of room for improvement, but I think it shows that there is an appetite to actually see checks being delivered for this vulnerable group of patients. So I think it's a really big thank you and a recognition of the effort put in by the primary care practices and all the staff across the system. Just spending a few moments on the graph included within the paper, it just basically illustrated the register sizes, which is highlighted in the orange compared to the number of checks delivered, which was in the blue, just to give an example of the size and scale of the delivery going on across the system. And when you look at the performance position, this is a historical comparison. So NHSE used to count a national target of 60%. So that's 60% of checks delivered for SMI against the total register size. They've somewhat dropped that performance indicator, looking to focus more on the overall register size and number of checks delivered rather than a percentage. But I've included this in the paper just to show you that there is more or less a bit of an equal distribution across the performance positions. On average, the system tends to sit around 38%, 39%. So it just shows you that if we were looking at previous benchmarking positions, we still have a way to go. But in our view, within the delegated team, we would 100% might be the ambition, but there is no reason why vulnerable patients can't access their checks, and that's what we are working on. Looking at Progress 3, the ICB has submitted a funding bid to increase the quality and the frequency of the LD and SMI annual health checks. This funding has been agreed now by NHSE, and we are looking to launch a proof of concept using point of care testings in primary care. So I think this is very exciting, and we are working quite closely with all major stakeholders to ensure a seamless rollout. There's quite a lot of interest in the work that we will be doing. And I think it will shine a light on the amazing staff, as well as, I don't want to say managers, but the amazing staff in the system that actually care for patients. So that's my 2 cents on the progress work we're doing. And finally, 2 more points from me before I open myself to any questions. Just looking at the benchmarking performance data, I had an action to collate system data to show how the Norfolk and Waveney ICB is comparing across the other colleagues in the East of England region. And looking purely on a ranking basis, so this is checks delivered versus register size, we rank 5th in the amount of activity going through our system using Q2 data. However, I would like to propose to everyone that we take that with a pinch of salt, because when you look at our planning trajectory submitted to NHSE, we are more or less on track. I think we're about 20 checks below where we said we would be for Q2. So even though our ranking is 5th, looking at our recovery data, we are more or less on track with some improvement work still to go. The trajectory is built around sustainability. So we want to make sure these changes we apply are embedded for the long term. And I'll end on a good note, just focusing on the COVID vaccinations for the SMI cohorts. Our region is one of the highest performers in the East of England region. We topped the table with an uptake of about 58.95%. So we are the region topper in the East of England, but when you also look at the national average of COVID uptake within the SMI population, the national average is 51%, and we are performing at 58.95. So once again, this is down to the hard work being done within primary care and NSFT. Other than that, I'll take a pause there just to answer any questions.
Many thanks, Julian. Any questions or comments for Julian? James Reader.
Yeah, sorry, me again. Could you just explain, you were saying that you were getting funding for an improved health check. What improvement is there going to be, and why do we need it?
Yeah, definitely. So the main components of the severe mental illness health check will remain the same. I think the improvement in quality will come from the use of a point of care testing kit, James. So effectively what that means is if a patient goes in for an SMI health check, they will have to have their bloods taken, be analyzed, sent to the laboratory. There might perhaps be a wait until that happens. Then there's the other issues around this is a vulnerable group of patients. So approaching someone with a needle might induce needle phobia, etc. So the use of points of care testing is effectively a pinprick that's administered while the patient is in clinic in the finger. The test then can be analyzed in front of the patient while the GP is sitting across them. So our thinking is once we get this on the road, will be the patient will have this pinprick. The test will be running in the background while the clinician goes through the height, weight, smoking history, alcohol. And once the test results come back, there will be then in the same appointment a face-to-face conversation with the patient to say, we've done your blood results. This is what we can see. You don't have to come back. You don't have to receive a letter from us. We can actually act on this clinical information. This is our thinking very early on, but we still have a long process of engagement to do with colleagues across the system within primary care as well as the LMC. But I think our thinking is this will improve the quality of the health check and actually give patients more ownership of their care, so they can see the blood results in action rather than just a letter, etc.
Thank you very much. And I've just come back on that. Then is that something that it would be benefit to all patients?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm going to go on a limb and say I think we need to look at it a little bit more closely, but definitely consensus say yes. But I think there's a huge caveat in terms of equipment and staffing costs. But Shepard, please rein me in.
Shepard?
Just to say, you're right, James. That's what clinical colleagues are saying. They are actually asking us, can we use it for other things? But like Gillian said, we really need to keep it and protect it for the cohort that we have until then. Yeah, fortunately. Yeah. But it's exciting times.
Yeah, indeed. And like also Shepard covered before. So when you guys have had the opportunity to have experience with this additional equipment and the benefits that can be derived from it, it would be good to bring that back to the committee. I had one small request, Julian, for the report, the benchmarking data compared to other parts of east of England. If in future reports you could add sort of a percentage perspective to the table, then I think it would add to what the reader can take away from it. So if there's no further questions, many thanks, Julian. And we move to item 11, which is a paper on self-assessment. Sadie, can I hand over to you?
Thank you. And again, I'll assume that everybody's had a chance to read the paper. As you will see, this is a slightly shortened version than you might have seen before if you were part of the CCG process, as was, which is to reflect that the ICB was only formed on the 1st of July. So as you can see there, I undertook the self-assessment. I've included it as an appendix. The area I would like to note is that we've marked one no, which is because we haven't yet got to the point of doing an annual report, although of course officers do form part of the annual report process. And then secondly, I just want to note, because it does tend to come up in our discussions on quite a regular basis, that we are still working on obtaining a single dashboard of data for the committee. That isn't yet ready, but notwithstanding that, as we've just had with LD and SMI and so on, we do bring regular data to committee members. We would just like to be able to present it in a single dashboard. So that is still ongoing with colleagues in the BI team. So I wasn't proposing to say anything else on this other than if members are happy with the self-assessment as it stands, or if they have any comments, we can take that on board, and it will be presented to the board in due course along with the other committee self-assessments.
Excellent, many thanks, Sadie. So any comments from anyone? No, I'm fine with it as well. So I take it it is approved herewith.
Thank
so
you.
Many thanks, Sadie. That takes us to item 12, the prescribing report. Michael, you want to introduce that?
Yep. Hi, thanks, Hein. Take the paper as read. I'll just highlight a few things. I'm conscious of time and etc. So our standard report. So next month we'll be bringing the next year's prescribing quality scheme for approval of the committee. That's currently with the LMC. We're working up as we did last year, a low-cost, cost-effective switch program, which will launch later. We didn't want to bombard practices, and we're also in the pipeline. We've got a possible, subject to approval, optimization scheme, which practices may choose to take part in, which will help medicines optimization, etc. So prescribing performance, second highest in terms of spend in the sub ICBs within the east of England, and that's on non normalized for deprivation scores. So it is based on numbers of patients weighted for age, so what is normally prescribed for that particular age, but higher deprivation areas have larger number and more severe long-term conditions. So that is one of the reasons that we tend to prescribe as a higher cost per standard normalized patients without normalizing for, because we can't normalize for deprivation as such. Just looking at no cheaper stock obtainable. There's rather a lot of drug shortages at the moment, and next month I'll bring along our not long approved with the LMC and LPC approach to dealing with drug shortages. So you can see the kind of industry that is involved in dealing with these issues. But when they're in short supply, the standard price that the Department of Health would like us to pay is lifted, and the wholesalers have to go out to the wider market, which may involve kind of global prices, and costs go up. So projected cost for December, for instance, was 985. Looking today, it's going to be a little bit less than that. But projected costs for January, in terms of no cheaper stock obtainable, i.e. price concessions, has more or less doubled from 345 to over 600,000 in January, which is slightly unwelcome. So those are things that are outside our control. Dependence forming medicines, not much change in opioids. Gabapentinoids has improved again. So I think we did suggest that if it continued to improve, we would have due consideration to removing it from our risk register, because we're no longer in the top quartile. In fact, we're near being off the top third. Hypnotics and anxiolytics, we continue to come down at a faster rate than national average. We're now fourth again. We've been hovering around third and fourth for a little while, but that should continue to decline. And in terms of antibiotics, antibiotic volume clearly went up during the strep A issue prior to Christmas. But our volume is a little bit higher than England average, so we'll continue to work on that. We have talked to National about whether the targets would be lifted in as a result of the big increase in prescribing and some shortages as a result, and the answer was no. So it's just encouraging practices to get back to normal, or the new normal, in due course. It's so we will take that into account as we look at outliers, etc. Our broad spectrum antibiotics, which is the ones that can cause us more problems, has continued to come down, and in table 7 there's only 5 practices who are above our 14% benchmark of tending to be high prescribers, etc. So as I say, next month I will bring our approach to dealing with drug shortages, etc. If anybody wants any reports on any specific aspects of prescribing, do let me know, because I'm very happy to change the format of this report, because it's been the same for quite a long time. Thank you. Any questions, comments?
Thanks, Michael. I think I've made a few tweaks to your report over the
yes, you have
the months. Welcome any comments, but maybe I go first with a couple I had. The last point you mentioned on the outlier practices, indeed good to see this far. So the list is much shorter. So is that a result of being able to engage with the practices that are no longer there, or is there another lever you've been able to pull?
It's we have been engaging with these practices and doing audits, etc., and getting them to use our current formulary. There were some practices using older formularies for whatever reason, so we've managed to embed that, etc. So working with the practices has been the key thing there, really.
Yeah.
And just being very supportive rather than
yeah
the other approach.
Good to hear. And then the other point, which we can see in the finance report, has big financial consequence, the no cheaper stock available. Anything in the crystal ball? Because the chart on page 88 suggests we may have peaked, but
well, I don't know. December was a record month. it has dropped down by 50k in terms of projected, so we won't have the actual figures until we get December actual usage. So the answer is no, really. It is quite a random kind of stock market of quite common drugs. I mean, the biggest one is omeprazole 20 milligram capsules, which is such a common drug, but the price concession on that is slightly eye-watering at the moment. And we're kind of, because we're relatively cost effective on our use of those particular drugs, PPIs they're called, for antacids, etc. We're being penalized effectively. So it is tempting to consider some switch program, but that would be it'll just bulge out elsewhere. So it's really quite tricky. So it's a national problem. We're affected, not particularly worse than any other area, it has to be said.
Yeah, thanks. Any questions or comments for Michael? No, many thanks, Michael, for the update. That takes us to item 13, the finance report. James Granger.
Thanks, Hein. Yeah, so as usual, I'll just point out the key points from the report. So as we see from the exec summary, the position at month 9 for primary care and prescribing is a £3.3 million adverse to budget for the ICB, which represents quarter 2 and quarter 4 of this financial year. However, this does not include a £4.5 million payment that is due from NHS England for additional R spend. When this is received in full, which we've been now told will be in the month 11 allocation, the actual position will then be £1.2 million favourable. The position does include efficiencies of just over £7.3 million built into the budget, which forms part of the full year efficiency of 8.4. Continued monitoring of the efficiency projects. We are on month 9 now, forecasting them to be slightly below plan. The highest risk project is the cost-effective switching program. However, at the moment, we think there's some additional data that's going to come through, which will show that is actually performing slightly better than we think it has so far. If we move into the financial summary, it shows that the GP prescribing is 2.5 million adverse to plan at month 9, with figures being 2 months in arrears, so showing the April to October estimates cumulatively are undervalued. In addition, the efficiency savings materialised in a period allowing the forecast to be delivered. These efficiency expectations are already baked into our budget, so of that £7.3 million requirement, the requirement for the 9 months, we've received 7 months of that of actual achievement, so more to come on that. There are also prior year benefits propping up the position within GP prescribing. These are quite critical to our planning for next year, because obviously these will not be available in 23-24. There are also prior benefits and other positive variances within the delegated primary care area, which have crystallised worth around £1.8 million year to date. Moving on to the detailed financial analysis, that shows the key drivers behind that prescribing spend that Michael has already described. There's still huge areas of risk around CGM and SGLT2 and the NCSO, which is the more rising figure at the moment. We keep monitoring the EPAC data for DOACs, CGM and SGLT2 to look at the year-on-year increases in these areas, and they are still showing large increases up to month 9. Looking at the specific funding areas, delegated co-commissioning underspend here is predominantly due to the way in which the PMS GMS budgets are ring-fenced to delegated primary care, worth 3.1 million, and prior year credits from 21-22 around QOF, worth around 1.8 million. These are offset by the ARS funding, which is yet to be received, which would mean that the cost centre is underspent overall. Other areas of overspend within here are more minimal, and they're around QOF and some list size increases. Then moving on to the GP and other prescribing detail, slide shows the detailed variances within prescribing, leading to the overall month 9 adverse forecast of 3.7. As you can see, this has moved significantly from month 8 to month 9. It's about a £2.5 million swing. As more of these prescribing pressures start hitting us, specifically those NCSO ones detailed before, and also around some flu prescribing and the corresponding recharges we get from NHS England, and the diabetes related prescribing and NCSOs. We keep monitoring the year-on-year increases and working with the meds management team to work out anything that can be done in these areas. There are also some staff-related slippages that mitigate the position slightly, but overall a significant deterioration in that area. So that was all I was going to go through. Is there any questions?
Many thanks, James. And it's indeed a stark increase in the forecast outturn for prescribing costs, as you say, and you along the way answered my question when we could expect the additional allocation for ARRS. So good to hear that it's being expected soon. Mark.
Sorry, yes, thanks, Hein, and thanks, James, for the helpful report. Just to be really clear, I'm just keen, that R's funding month 11, is there any risk of that not arriving, that it's now concluded, we're expecting that, no issue? Sorry, just to emphasise a point.
No, absolutely, and it's something that we highlight regularly, and we speak to NHS England regularly. It has moved back, so it was originally month 10, and now they've moved it to month 11. But I think that is just due to the forecast changing, because obviously they have to make that final payment to us to make sure that it's covered all of our ARRS requirements.
Okay, thanks, James. Thanks, Hein.
Any other questions or comments for James? No, many thanks. That takes us to A or B. I believe, Sarah, we have not received via email any questions from the public. Is that correct?
Nothing received, Hein, thanks.
Good. We have a few members of the public in the call, so let me check. Is there any question from a member of the public? And is there any questions from a member or attendants? No. Well, many thanks for joining today in what was a shorter meeting. For those taking part in part 2, I suggest we reconvene at 10:15. To the rest of you, wish you a good day and hope to see you in the next time. Thank you.
Thank you.